Hi there, I'm Cece Ciccone.
I'm Kelsey Bowman.
This is Go Big or Go DCOM. And Kelsey, we watched a good one this week,
We did
an
the
intense one.
intense but good, The Color of Friendship.
Yep. So this is the first one in our Black History Month kind of mini
Yes,
series that we're doing this month.
we will be doing Black leads all month long for Disney Channel original movies. And this one, our podcast ep will premiere on February 5th, which is the 24th anniversary of this movie.
That's nuts.
February 5th, 2000. What's even more nuts is that the movie came out in 2000, is based in 1977. Okay.
Okay.
It's 2000 is closer to 1977 than we are to 2000.
2000.
So if a movie was made in a
Wow.
way back in the day, it would be 2001.
So let's start there.
Let's start
Um,
there.
let's start with the fact that this takes place in 1977, which I didn't know. I came into this cold. I had seen commercials for The Color of Friendship before.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously knew that it existed. Haven't seen it. Knew nothing of what it was about. So immediately in the opening screen, it says 1977 Washington D.C. And I was like, oh, weird. Because correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is like the only historical DCOM.
I can't think of any others that are set in the past. We'll find out together, but I
We'll
can't think
find
of any
out.
others that are
So
set in the
so
past
it's
like
set in the
this.
past, and this was kind of something just right off the bat. This does not feel like a DCOM to me.
No,
This feels way too serious to be a
it's so
DCOM.
heavy.
It's so heavy. We'll talk a little bit about some of the language that's there. I think the story that they were going for, well, I have a lot of opinions. I have a lot of opinions. I don't know the right time to talk about all of them.
Anytime.
But I think the thing is that the story that they were going for, I cannot imagine that kids would really get it.
How did the pitch meeting for this go? So
Right.
it is based on, we have real characters here.
Real
Congressman
characters.
Ron Dellums,
Yep.
his wife and children are real. In real life, they had 6 kids. They had 3 in this movie because they didn't need the other 3.
Yeah.
Um, the apartheid is real. Stephen Biko is real. The
Uh-huh.
bill that Congressman Dellums is fighting for is real. And Congressman Dellums and his wife really did host. They hosted 2 white South African exchange students,
So
and
so
who
let's
were this age.
let's start there
They
with the
combined
premise.
them.
Let's start with the
Okay.
premise. So the whole
Yes.
premise, and we can dig into the parts a little bit deeper, is yes, Congressman Dellum, his daughter Piper, is really, really interested in African culture. Is really, really interested in her past and wants to engage that. And she thinks that the best way to do it is to get an exchange student from Africa. So she does. She gets an exchange student from South Africa who is white. And so that's the whole thing. This is during apartheid.
In a big piece of both situational and dramatic irony, we are aware of who the characters are until Mari, the exchange student, lands at the airport. She is not aware that she is staying with a Black American congressman and his family, and the
Right.
family is not aware that they are getting a white South African exchange student.
So there's a lot here, right? So like they're in the airport to pick up Mari, the white South African girl. And they see like a teenage black girl and think that it might be her. And Mari just walks right by them, overhears them saying her name, and she's like, "Oh, like I'm Mari." And you get the sense that she immediately thinks
Maybe we should
that
start at the
okay,
absolute
I
beginning.
am just gonna go. Yeah,
And
you
that's
got to
fine.
stop me
I'll
because
keep stopping you.
I have lots of thoughts about all of it.
So
Go
we
ahead.
see Piper convince her dad. She'd apparently been trying to convince him, and we see her convince him with African culture. She is trying to get more in touch with her roots. I think this during the civil rights movement. I mean, I'm not Black and I wasn't alive at this time, so
Mhm.
this is all second, third hand
Sure.
things I've read. There was a big resurgence of this, people wanting to get more in touch with their culture because
Mhm.
almost all Black people in this country,
Yeah.
especially at that time, didn't leave Africa willingly.
Right.
And so
Absolutely.
her dad is a congressman. He's a very well educated. He's a very influential Black man.
Mhm.
He does agree to it. Her mom, Roscoe is a great name, I was thinking.
It is a great name.
Does
Yeah,
help
it's
convince
nice.
him.
Mhm.
And then we switch to see Mari, to juxtapose these two girls doing the same thing. Her mom's okay with it. She has to convince her father, who's a South African police officer, to let her go. He does agree. We see her do it at a restaurant where we do see, I mean, the differences. This is a restaurant where in South Africa, where it's all white people eating, the wait staff is Black. A wait staff member accidentally spills something on an older white patron who kicks him and calls him a slur. We're not going to use it's a South African slur. It starts with a K, so we're going to call it the K word.
Yep. Yeah, so he uses a
And
slur, kicks him down, and everyone just kind of acts like that's normal.
that's right. It's completely
That's just what they
okay.
do.
There doesn't seem to be any of an issue with that from the other people. We obviously have an issue with that. And
Yeah.
then her father mentions that Stephen Biko was arrested because he's a police officer. I didn't really remember the Stephen Biko because I had seen this, obviously.
Okay.
I've seen it several times when I was in middle school. We
Mhm.
watched it in class. So I don't think I've watched it since then. And I mean, it's a movie that is really intense. So I feel like anyone who'd seen it at that age would have it. Like, I remembered that kicking scene vividly because it's appalling.
Oh yeah, it is. It's just like it's so dehumanizing.
And it really is unexpected.
Well, and so here's the issue, right? When we're talking about DCOMs and a Disney Channel original movie, and you have a scene like what happened in that restaurant where a white man kicks a Black man down on the ground, and there's not really any commentary on it, is that they're not actually like for kids of a certain age, you very explicitly have to say things, right? And so this idea that like, I don't know, this kid, his sister could have spilled something on him and then just like repeats the behavior that he saw in a movie that had no commentary around it, where, someone spilled something and then they got kicked. And it's not because we know, because we have the sense of it's 1977, it's apartheid in South Africa. We know that that man was kicked because of his race. That's not necessarily what an 8 or 10-year-old is going to understand. Anyway.
True, which makes us think, what is the age demographic they're going after? Maybe 10, maybe 9 and up with this movie.
Honestly, I felt like this was a PG-13 movie. Like
it felt that way.
Like it because of some of the language that they used, because of some of the violence. And just the topic matter being the political situation at the time, not necessarily just the friendship of these two individuals, which anyway, I'll have other thoughts that I'll share afterwards, because I think that this movie could have been done a lot better if it had been sent in the current day, quite frankly. So anyway,
in 2000,
in 2000,
current day.
Yeah, absolutely, at the time that it was made. But I think that there will be more opportunities to talk about that. So as we go,
let's keep going. Her father does eventually agree that she can go. He's pretty negative about it the whole time, in the sense that he keeps saying, you're just going to want to come back. You're not going to want to stay.
He doesn't think she's going to like it.
Yeah, he's not the most supportive person. You did hear some Afrikaans in the background in that restaurant scene. You heard Meneer and Dankjewel, which are both from Dutch, because the Dutch actually colonized South Africa.
Yeah,
I used to live in the Netherlands, so like my ear picks it up because I used to live in the Netherlands and I speak some Dutch. Yeah, it's Afrikaans is very similar to Dutch because it's just Dutch.
No, Afrikaans is not the one that has the clicks, right?
No, that's a different. So Afrikaans is like the white language in South Africa.
Okay. All right.
It was the official language. I mean, now a lot of people also speak English, but it's what they forced. So when they were forcing people to get rid of tribal languages, they were replacing it with Afrikaans.
Got it. Okay.
So we see Mari is about to leave. She has a conversation with her housekeeper, Flora, who is Black. Flora says, I think it'll be good for you to go. You can see how people think differently, which was, again, very subtle for a Disney Channel original movie. That played, so this premiered in 2000. I probably came home from second grade one time, watched my Lizzie McGuire, and then this just came on after.
And you just had a Black housekeeper was raising the children essentially. You kind of get that sense
Yeah.
that she was raising the children. Yeah, absolutely. And no comment on that whatsoever. Just kind of an understanding of that was how it was.
hmm
Um,
Um,
so
Piper and her siblings have friends from Nigeria, so they're asking him about Africa, and he's saying, "I don't know that much about South Africa. Nigeria is nowhere near South Africa. I just,
which is something
know
that
about apartheid."
still is common. I have an aunt and uncle who are missionaries in Tanzania, and they've been there for probably a year and a half now. But before they went, they just kept telling everyone like, "We're going to Africa. We're going to Africa." And I kept being like, there are very different parts of
Right.
Africa. Like they're not interchangeable. So
hmm
that's still something that, exists today where
hmm
people kind of think, yeah. Um
And so then we see Mari talking to Flora, her housekeeper, again. She's talking about going. She mentions, "Oh, this is the name of the family that I'm staying with." And we again very subtly see Flora kind of piece it together.
right, like she realizes, I don't know,
And Flora,
well, because I guess Congressman Dellum was, a staunch advocate for the
yes.
Black community in South Africa, that she must have recognized his name. Yeah.
She says, "Did you send them a photo?" This is 1977. People are just sending their children across the world with people to people we've never seen photos to, and I guess we're talking to them on the phone maybe twice.
Yeah. Seems like they didn't even
Bananas.
talk on the phone.
No,
There was
it
just
seemed
nothing.
even, yeah. She
Yeah.
says she'll write. We don't actually see her write, but I'm sure she did. And then her brother catches a bird, and then Flora tells us it's a weaver bird. They lived near my village. They all lived in giant, basically woven houses together. No matter on the weaver birds come in all different colors, and
Yeah. And they work
they all
together
are.
to,
Mhm.
yeah, to build safety. So, yeah, so here we are.
Mari leaves in the next scene, and she's asking Flora, "Did you pack this? Did you pack that?" So it's clear Flora is their
Like
housekeeper.
a servant,
She's a,
almost.
yeah.
I think servant would be a fair word to
Yes,
use.
I mean they're paying her, but it's like she does everything for them. It seems
Right.
like her brother runs up with a flag that we learn is a flag for the pro
Resistance,
civil rights
basically.
Black movement, and I don't know its
Yeah.
name in South Africa at the time. Flora says, "I'll take it." So that's how we learn, this is illegal. And she says our parents would be so mad if they saw you with it. Her brother doesn't realize what it is. He found it in the road.
Right.
And Flora says, "I'll take it," shoves it in her pocket. Mari gets in the car to leave. And then again, very subtly, especially if you don't read, which some of the people who watched this movie didn't, Flora goes to like a little box that she has, opens it up, and we see another resistance flag, and B, our news clippings about Congressman Ron Dellums.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how
So
he's trying to
she's
lead bills that are anti-apartheid. So I was kind of like, what's the point of these bills? And I Googled it. It would impose sanctions
right.
against South Africa until apartheid ended, which would put a lot of pressure against South Africa to end
Financial
apartheid.
pressure. Right.
Exactly. And America doing it first, obviously, America's very influential. So it would, in theory, and we learned at the end that years later it did pass in 1986, and other countries in Europe did follow, which was important, obviously,
Yeah.
to try to get
So
apartheid to end.
I'm gonna jump in here. But before we get back
Sure.
to when Mari gets to the United States. So this is 1977. Martin Luther King Jr. was killed less than 10 years before. And you get the sense in this movie, there's a couple of lines in passing where someone will say something like, "Oh, it's bad here too," or like, "We don't have all of our problems fixed." But the overwhelming sense is that in 1977, civil rights has been achieved in the United States of America. And do you get that sense?
Yes, you get that. I was saying true, you get that sense. I did not want it to come across as true. By 1977, we just solved all
Right,
civil
right. No,
rights
no, no.
issues.
I got you. So because like you see, like they go through the black neighborhoods of Washington D.C., which Kelsey and I lived in D.C. For college, and they make it seem very nice and like very normal, and just like I mean, for goodness sakes, it's 2024 and we're still very far ways from having true equity.
We are, I will say, America's place in the civil rights movement is different from where South Africa's is even
Right.
currently.
And I agree, but I think as an American movie, this gave the sense that this was an issue somewhere else.
Yes, everything
And
was perfect in America. I mean,
right,
the Civil Rights Bill or the Civil Rights Act was 1964.
right.
And was Washington, D.C. segregated before 1964? I think so.
I mean, it's pretty much still segregated now, although not legally.
Sure. I mean, right. But I was
Right,
thinking
right,
about
right.
like their school seems to be
Yeah,
majority Black. Well,
absolutely.
like Ruby Bridges, who the movie Ruby is about, was
Uh-huh.
also played on DCOM on Disney Channel, but it's not DCOM.
Right,
Like that was Louisiana. That was Baton Rouge, I'm pretty sure. I'm from Louisiana. Ruby Bridges is 67 today.
right. Yeah, she's not
So
even old.
this is not right. This is not like a long time ago history.
Yeah, and so that's what kind of confused me about it was like, why did like this she could have been a white South African that came in 2000 and like they still had to deal with the differences.
Because in 2000, apartheid and most of the ends of apartheid that ended the sanctions again with America
Yeah.
were repealed by 92. And then they had the first free elections in South Africa in 1994. So yeah, in 2000,
Right.
this was still very of the times
So like
in
most
South
of my
Africa.
knowledge of South African history and culture comes from Trevor Noah's memoir, which was called Born a Crime, which is because his father was white and his mom
Mm-hmm.
was black, and that was illegal. You know, he was it was illegal for him to exist. But he's very close in age to us, and still, talks about like how poor the black people were in South Africa and all this. So I think they made a couple of mistakes here. The first was framing it as like South Africa has the main problem and
Mm-hmm.
not us as an American movie, but then also by setting it in the past, as framing it as, oh, this I can't believe things were like that in 1977, and yet in Mean Girls in 2004 they make the joke about her being white and from
Mm-hmm.
Africa. So yeah, I was kind of disappointed. I didn't think it needed to be take place in 1977, although I guess they're following a
It
true
is
story.
based on, that's
Right.
why I think at the end of the day, it's based on a short story Piper wrote
Hmm.
about these exchange students. And so that is what they based it on, I guess, because
Yeah.
they had the content. I guess also, especially handling something this heavy, they probably figured it was best to go off of a real situation, a real starting point.
So to put Ruby Bridges into like perspective, I watched Ruby Bridges when I was in maybe like fifth grade in school. So that would have been close to 20 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and it felt like it was so in the past. And Ruby
It's
Bridges was
true.
47,
It's the same
like
as when Nelson Mandela died, not just a few years
exactly
ago.
same thing.
Everyone said, I thought he'd been dead for 20, 30 years. And that's not true.
No,
Apartheid
because
ended in
everything happened in the 90s. Yeah,
1994. Everything, the Berlin Wall fell. I went to
right.
Berlin and it was just wild to be like, wow, this is where the Berlin Wall fell. And then to be like, oh, it wasn't so long ago.
No, it wasn't. And I think, yeah,
And we went to, this is about Berlin, but we went to a
sure.
club because I went on a girls' trip to Berlin when I was living in the Netherlands. And we went to a club. And so we're like, at the club and it's on the river.
Yeah,
And the wall was on the exact opposite side. And the club had been open since the 60s. It was one of the oldest clubs because Berlin is very known for its clubbing scene.
it
It
is.
was one
Yeah,
of the oldest clubs in Berlin. So I just kept thinking,
just stayed
people were
open,
here clubbing it here in the
and
60s,
and then they just
70s,
couldn't
80s,
go home.
90s, and then they couldn't go across the river, or people across the river could hear and see
Right.
the club music. And
And
that
they
was just
couldn't
wild
come.
to me.
Yeah, it is. No, it is. So yeah, so those are just my thoughts, and I hear it's a real story, it's a true story, and so they needed to place it like that. I don't know, for such an important lesson, I I felt like, yeah, I mean, even just the fact that like, oh, she's a white girl from Africa, like, but Piper didn't really have any white friends in America, you know?
Yeah, her brothers have one
Yeah,
white friend.
who played JT in Degrassi: The Next Generation?
You and your all the
I
Degrassi's.
know. None of them are actors anymore. They all like moved
Mm.
on. But I guess at the time their parents were trying to get them up and running, and as we talked before, 2000, 2001, 2002, DCOMs were coming out every single month.
They were just churning
So
these things out.
they had
The
to have
actress who
a
plays Piper was in several other DCOMs.
right. She looked so familiar to me, but I couldn't. I looked at
She's
her
in
filmography.
Xenon Z2, the sequel.
See, I only saw that like once.
Not a
I don't know
Z,
that it
not
would
a
have.
Z. I am
We're gonna
obsessed with
get there.
Xenon.
Okay, so February we're doing Black History. March we're doing Women's History. Xenon is coming, so is Impossible. Don't worry. But right now we
There's
are
so much.
watching.
The first week in April, we're doing The Descendants also, because we got to get back to the musical.
I know someone actually sent me a message and was like, "When are you gonna do Lemonade Mouth?" And I was like, I didn't even know that was a thing. So
I've
anyway,
never seen that one. We need the youths. Youths, please tell us what to do from your generation.
that's right. Um, so back to Washington D.C. in
Back to
1977.
Washington, D.C. next episode.
Uh, that situation that I was describing before at the airport, Mari gets off. They're looking for a black girl because that's the whole reason why they were doing this exchange. Mari overhears them saying her name. She says, "Oh, that's me," and immediately says, "Okay, like I have two bags." So you immediately get the sense that she thinks that the congressman has sent his servants or his
Mm-hmm.
staff
Right.
um to get them up, and so she says, "Where's the congressman?" Roscoe, his wife, says, "We're gonna go see him." And
Washington, D.C. was the public schools were segregated. They had very few Jim Crow laws. However, the existing laws did mandate segregation in the public schools and recreational facilities, but not in the streetcars and public libraries. So
when did that end though?
Piper, 1964,
Okay,
with the civil rights, I don't know its name when that passed,
the act.
the act.
Well, but then you had, see, I'm exposing my ignorance of like when was Brown versus Board of Education, because that was really interesting. I actually went to one of the schools. It's a national park now, devoted to Brown versus Board of Education.
1954.
Okay, so that
But
was
the
earlier.
act didn't pass till 1964. So I guess 1954 when school see again. I don't know.
I mean,
We
it
need to know.
was.
That's why we need to know more about this. Makes it seem so far in the past, but it wasn't.
It wasn't at all. And like it's interesting what I was saying when I was in one of the schools that was in Brown versus Board of Education, and it closed and then they left it exactly as it was. So now it's a
Oh
national
wow.
park. And
Where
I
is
mean,
that?
tiny it's in Kansas in uh it's right when you cross the border. T starts with a T. Hold on.
Topeka.
It is Topeka. Yeah, that's exactly it. We weren't planning on going. I was driving across the country and we saw the sign, and I said to my sisters, I was like, "When else are you going to be in Topeka, Kansas? We really should go." So we went. Tiny. I mean, it's a small school, like one hallway, you know. Um, but to the left was the black kids' school, and to the right was the white kids' school,
Wow.
and the classrooms were smaller, the desks were worse, like all of this stuff. And it was just to like see it in front of your eyes like that, like they use different doors to walk into the same building. And I don't know. You hear the
Mm-hmm.
stories and then to actually like see a water fountain in front of your face that like says
Yeah.
coloreds over it, like that it's just um
Yeah.
like it's such
And
a dark part of our history, and it's not
it's
that
true.
long ago.
And some of it is to some, like, so I grew up in New Orleans, which was obviously still
Hmm.
has racial issues, was a very
Sure.
hotbed for Ruby Bridges is from Louisiana. So there are two very large parks in New Orleans that are owned by the city. There's City Park and then there's Audubon Park. Audubon Park is better kept. It has a golf course that's nicer. It is in a much better location. Audubon Park was the white park and City Park was the black park. But I didn't learn that until I was in high school. Like it wasn't really talked about that the reason we had two such large parks is because it was segregated. And it's the same idea. White people could go to City Park if they wanted to,
Right.
but black people could not go to Audubon Park.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, like, still in DC, like, U Street, you know,
Hmm.
like, U Street and the culture there, came out of the fact that the city was segregated to begin with, and then even though the laws took place, that didn't change the fact that, it was dangerous for certain people to go to certain parts of the city.
And like you
You know?
said, DC, a lot of the schools are still majority white or black, and
Very
it's the
much so.
same. It's the same in New Orleans.
Yeah. Isn't that yeah, I mean, and that's just it's because these this, the tribalism in our culture and then just, like, I mean, honestly, so much has to do with policing and, like, all of these other things that we don't have time to go into, and it's not
We
really
really don't
the point of our
have time.
show. But
Um,
the
Washington
point
DC
is
schools, sorry.
this was not something that stayed in 1977. It's not something that stayed in 2000. And that's why the story still resonates so, so deeply, I think, um, today.
Which is
So
maybe why they felt it was okay to play devil's advocate to set it in 1977, because it is still relatable.
fair enough.
Um, Brown versus Board of Education is when schools in DC desegregated. So it
Okay.
had been 23 years since desegregation.
Hmm.
Okay, so we pick Mari up at the airport. There is a scene where they're leaving the airport where Mari's walking way behind Piper and her mom, and they're having a conversation about her as if she's not there at all.
Right. She could totally hear them talking
You
about
can
her.
totally hear everything they're saying, but I guess she doesn't, because she's shocked in the next scene. And her mom is saying, we assumed Black African, she assumed white congressman, which, as you've said, are almost 60 years after this movie takes place, almost 50 years after this movie takes place, assumptions people might still make today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
if you picture congressman, I picture a really old white guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
And so they still take her. I would have skipped this trip if it
I
was
would have been
me.
like, you know what, we'll meet him at home.
Yeah, I'll call him. I'll tell him we were busy. They still take her to his office
Yeah,
in
in
the
one of the
Capitol,
congressional buildings. Yeah.
and he's meeting with, I'm assuming, like his staff or maybe some other Black congressmen. It's a room of entirely, very well dressed, like all in suits, Black men, which is
Right.
probably something. Mari's probably never been in a room with this many Black men ever in her life, especially ones who are so like well-dressed, influential,
Right.
are business people.
Sure.
And she is like, and then he's like, oh, bring her in. And Roscoe's like, I think we should talk for a second. Like, leave her in the car, even if you were gonna come here. I don't know. Like, and so they bring her in. She walks into this room. She's like, I thought I was gonna meet the congressman. He's like, I am the congressman. She's like, Roscoe's like, this is my husband, Congressman Ron Dellums.
The
And it's
girl
just, and
looks straight up terrified. Like
she's,
legitimately
yeah.
terrified.
And then she does like an awkward laugh. She's like, this must be a joke.
Right.
And it's not a joke. The room is silent. All of these men are staring at her. Piper is still just staring at her. Roscoe's staring at her. She runs out, I think. And then they go home.
And at home, Piper's brothers kind of like they make a comment that like they picked up some Zulu music and they like are wearing rather traditional African clothes and they have a sign for her. They're all ready. She walks in, she sees it. Pretty much the same reaction that like she comes to realize it's not a joke. For the next however long she's going to be there, she's going to be living with this Black family and she just runs up the stairs and locks herself in Piper's room. Um,
And one of the brothers makes the comment, I thought we ordered a real African, which just, again, shows you how just the differences between what they expected, what everyone expected, what everyone got, and just the cultural differences. And like we said, the only Black person in her life, we're under the assumption, is Florida, who works for her parents.
and so, I mean, I think another part of this, and it's something that like you told me that the Dutch colonized South Africa, and I had no idea that just like as Americans, because the colonization of America happened basically just by killing the indigenous people. Like I don't think we have a strong sense of what colonization in the rest of the world was like.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if that makes sense. Like, I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. for me, if I picture a South African, I picture someone of British descent. Like that's just what I picture.
And none of these accents, for the record, I'm the girl who played Mari, I looked it up, was born in California, and
Oh,
she's doing a British accent. These are not South African accents that we hear at all throughout the film. Because I was like,
there
oh,
you
South
go.
African, and then I was listening as I lived in the Netherlands. Afrikaans is very similar to Dutch. I knew a lot of not a lot. I worked with some South African people
Hmm.
who I met a couple of their spouses who had emigrated to the Netherlands,
Yeah.
and I will say it was all white people that I worked with
Right.
personally,
Right.
and because those are people who have more access to emigrating out of situations like that.
100%. I mean, it is not easy to get from South Africa to Europe. Like that
No,
is quite the trip, especially like I said, for any of the adults, I would highly recommend Trevor Noah's memoir just
yeah, I'll have to
to
read it.
to get the sense of the level of poverty that was just totally normalized.
And so I
Yeah.
know South African accents do that because I knew them personally. I also love garbage television. So I watch Below Deck and 90 Day Fiance would have
Yes.
South
Below
African
Deck does
people
have quite a
in
few South
them. So
Africans.
I'm aware. Like lekker, South African people say lekker all the time, which is a Dutch word. It means like good, great, like it means tasty, but they use it also as like
The
it's like you're eating
slang.
food, it's lekker. Right. My son went to daycare there, and my son is just like super relaxed guy from the time he was a baby, always has been super easygoing. So they would always be like, oh, he's lekker chilling.
I love that.
It's just so we still say it about him. If he's just like laying on the sofa, I'm like, oh, he's lekker chilling.
It's amazing. So
So that
Mari,
comes from the Dutch. Sorry, that was
yes.
just a fun tangent. That was a fun tangent. We have a lot of not fun tangents in this episode.
This movie is really intense. Like
Every second, I'm trying to think of a spot where I laughed.
there is a scene where Mari's like, I got you a gift, and Piper's like, I got you a gift too. And
That's true.
they gave each other the same bracelet. So that was kind of this moment of like, oh, we're not that different.
That's
We have
cute.
similar tastes. Haha.
So
Which
Mari hides in
is
the bedroom, which was that was a really good bonding. That was their first big bonding moment. Mari hides in the
yeah.
bedroom. We see her come out at night. She places an international call to her parents. I'm sure it was $5,000.
Probably in
Probably
1977.
right.
I
And
can't even
so,
believe that you could just place a collect call to South Africa in
oh, her
1977.
mom does say, "I'll accept the charges." So I guess her parents paid five
Yeah,
thousand
it was
dollars for
collect
the
call.
call.
Yeah.
And she's about to ask to come back, and her dad, Peter, is
A
like,
jerk.
"Oh, you want to come back already? Can you hang on a couple more days? The next flight's in 2 days." And
And
she
he was
just
like,
doesn't want
I
to
gave you
give
a week
in.
and you couldn't even wait 24
2 days,
hours. Yeah, or
right?
whatever.
So she says, "No, I'm having the time of my life. I'll stay."
Which, so I felt bad for her in
Me
that
too.
moment. And I think that that's something that kind of carries throughout this movie with Mari's character is this idea that she's racist. She's racist as all get out.
Yes.
Um, but it's not her fault. Um, I think I'm trying to do this very carefully. Because you get the sense that like she's a product of her culture, right? And for a
Mm-hmm.
13-year-old girl or whatever to recognize that that level of racism was wrong when everyone is telling you that these people are dangerous and blah 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 blah, blah, all of the racist
Mm-hmm.
stereotypes. Um and so she is like
And we see her, we'll discuss, she repeats them throughout the movie in
right.
just matter of fact ways, the way that she parrots what she has heard her entire life. Because at
Exactly.
13, you are not making your own decision. I know some grown adults who are just parroting everything
Well,
they've said they've heard their whole
exactly.
life, and she's
Is that
13.
she has this story in her head that black people are dangerous, that they're unable to govern, that they're ungovernable, oh my goodness, all of
Mm-hmm.
these things. And so she really believes that, and so she really believes that she is sleeping in a house where she is in danger.
And her
Like,
father is a police officer, so it's inherently tied to her feelings about her family that what the South African police and government are doing is correct.
right. So that said, racism is evil.
Yes.
and all of these things. And so I think that this does take another level to the story. Um, I mean, I think about like the things like my grandmother used to say that were just like horrifically racist. And
Oh, I mean, I wouldn't, not my grandparents specifically, but other people I know. And then in the South, just things I've heard other
right,
people's
yeah, sure,
family
being in the
members
South.
say. So, because both of my parents were from, my dad was from Michigan. My mom was born in Baltimore and grew up in Boston. So they moved
Mhm.
from the North to the South. So my extended family is not Southern. And so just like going to other people's things though, and just hearing things, you're what,
Yeah. And
what?
so when you're raised in that culture, something has to happen for you to see that it's wrong. You're
Mhm.
not, because as we all grow up thinking that we're raised perfectly, right? Like you don't know anything different from how you're raised.
Right.
And
And your parents
so
are perfect.
I think that played a very interesting role that I don't think you could do now. Like
Right.
I don't think that you could do a movie now where someone is not presented as
It's
evil
it's the same
and
way
as
you couldn't
racist.
do The Office now
Sure. Sure.
because
Because
Michael
it's just
Scott's
like
character is racist and is bigoted, and you
it's like,
you do
my
see him
goodness.
change over the course, but not like apologize for
No.
anything.
But it's like
So
we
you
have
could not
so
do The
many
Office now.
resources now. There's so many resources, so many conversations that are happening. There's no I don't know. You cannot justifiably say like any of the
It's true.
things that are
Also,
said
you're
in
right.
this
It's
movie.
1977. She can't Google, like, I don't know, are black people dangerous? Like, she can't Google that.
Right. And like, I don't
It's
know.
not a
They
thing.
they didn't have the new Jim Crow or like
And they
all
and
of
the
these books that
government,
we've read now.
she mentions later, the government bans books. They're banned. You
Oh,
can't
that's
go
right.
on the internet and just find them. I mean, some obviously there are governments who do a very good job of scrubbing the internet of things.
Sure.
Okay, so we should keep going. The next scene, Roscoe and Ron are discussing it. Ron says, I want her out. I don't want a
Right.
racist kid in my house that I'm raising. Like, I'm a congressman who's so anti-apartheid. What does this say about me? And Roscoe says, we owe it to her. Roscoe's really the voice of like reason throughout
Yeah.
this whole movie. We owe
Well,
it to
it's the
her to keep her. I mean, someone's got to be. It's a Disney Channel
yeah.
movie.
Well, but it's the same situation as Mari felt, that the congressman sees a white African, a South African, as dangerous to his family.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, so you do have Roscoe there who's like, wait a second, she's a kid, you
Yeah.
know.
And he says, and she says, well, the conversation ends with he's saying, our kids aren't racist. Racism's bad. And Roscoe's like, it's complicated. And our kids aren't racist because we've raised them not to be racist.
Mm,
It's so they're saying, the sense of this is she's a product of her environment,
right.
and we owe it to her to try to change her life to some extent. And I did read an article that collaborated with the actual Piper in real life, and she
Oh,
said when
interesting.
they did this exchange, they did think, oh, how great to get a Black South African out of that situation for a year. So
Mm,
put it in like that. They're thinking, oh, we're gonna help this person, show them that like in America, our at the very basis level, our schools aren't segregated. You can go where you want. You don't have to carry an identification card that says the districts you're allowed to go to and your
right.
occupation.
You can become a member of Congress, you
You
know?
can vote in this country. So
Right.
it's and then they get a white girl
Yeah.
who sees it completely differently. So they do say she can stay.
Mhm.
But the next day, Mari still hasn't come out of the room by what seems to be afternoon.
Yeah.
Roscoe tells Piper, try to bring her this, fast food that I brought. Piper goes upstairs and it's Piper's bedroom that Mari is locked in. So Piper picks the lock because she says, I know how to open this door. I've locked myself out before. And then Mari asked to stay, essentially. I mean, we have a couple more conversations. Mari asked to stay because she doesn't want to admit to her father that she wants to go home.
Hmm.
Seems to be her driving force, and Roscoe says yes.
Yeah. And they do give her her own room and like seem like very respectful
Mhm.
of her
As
choice.
they're moving her bags down the hall, Ron grabs them and he goes to take them to the car, and Piper does like such a big shift, which just seemed like a very 13-year-old thing because earlier she'd been like, I don't want her, I'm really disappointed, I want her out of here. And then they have the conversation where they exchange bracelets and they bond a little bit. And she's like, no, Dad, she's not leaving. She's going down the hall to her room. That was felt like a very realistic 13-year-old moment.
Love it.
They have, you know, a breakfast scene where Mari expects like a much larger breakfast spread, but they don't have a servant in the Dellum's household, so
just cereal.
just cereal. And then we have this scene where they're driving, so they're going to the mall, they're going to pick out clothes for the first day of school. They're driving through, like you said, the Black neighborhoods that are not as nice as the neighborhood that the Dellums live in. And she is saying, the man washes their windshield. She says, oh, does his card, which is a reference to she, you know, can't imagine any system of government other than the one that she's been brought up in.
Right.
So she's referencing the cards that you have to carry as a Black person in South Africa during apartheid that say where you're from and where you're allowed to travel. And this is what Stephen Biko was arrested for, was simply because he was becoming a leader in South Africa. He originally ran a student organization, but he was in college. And then he started a whole Black coalition organization. And he gave speeches, he went around the country trying to get people to join. So they restricted his access to the a province, I think, that he lived in. And he was arrested for crossing borders within the country.
Wow.
And that was it.
Yeah.
The man he was with was also arrested, and that man was held without trial for 533 days.
It's just, I mean, there's no words, right? Just to imagine that and to think, yeah, that it didn't happen that long ago. Yeah, I was just telling someone today the story of a South African. He was a Black South African saint in 1990 who was martyred because they thought that he might be a witch.
Wow.
In 1990.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think that's, again, I don't know. I lived with someone from Portugal for a while, and when we would watch American news, she always commented on how like it was only about what happened in America. And like Americans have so little concept of what is happening outside in the rest of the world. And it's absolutely true. Because we didn't learn about South Africa in any of our history classes, you know? Like
the most we learned about Africa was Egypt. I went to Egypt, and our tour guides kept being like, yeah, everyone in America who visits is always like, I learned all about this. And we're like, why are y'all so into Egypt?
It's so true.
I was like, yeah, we're just really into Egypt.
But that's it. Like I have absolutely no, I mean, I know like Australia, that's where the British used to send their criminals. Like I don't know anything else about Australia. Like and all of that. So anyway, that's just a way to say yeah, how interesting it is that they picked this time in history. But then do we want to talk about they end up going to school together?
They do. Well, I was going to talk about they're at the mall. There's a fun bonding sequence at the mall.
Yeah, they try on cute clothes.
And Mari says, can everyone just shop together in this mall? Just to point out that South Africa is segregated. There are specific places that non-white people can't go. And then there is a scene where they're getting ice cream. A Black waiter accidentally spills ice cream in a white man's lap, and the white man is super nice about it. And you see her be like, oh, but again, it's they do a flashback. So it's not
to try to
incredibly subtle, but no one says it out loud.
Right. Yeah.
So
I don't know.
It's tough. Is it subtle? Because they did a flashback to directly juxtapose the scenes, but also no one said it's not okay to kick people of color out loud.
Right.
Which you shouldn't have to say out loud, obviously, but it is a movie for that young children are watching.
So I would think that a young child would say it's not okay to kick someone.
Right.
Right. And would not make the connection that he was kicked because he was Black.
It's not okay to kick anyone. It's especially not okay to kick people because of their race.
Yeah, right. It's not okay to treat a serving class as any less than anybody else.
So true, Bestie. So and then the embassy of South Africa calls. So we become aware that the South African embassy knows where she's staying and is like checking in, which it makes sense that the embassy would know. I mean, they should at least have a file of it. I would assume she has given address when she applied for her
Yeah.
visa.
Well, I mean, okay,
Yeah.
so if you're the South African embassy, there's this congressman who is advocating for laws that you think are going to ruin your country. And he just so happens to have a nice white girl in his house from your
Mm-hmm.
country. Like, yeah, like I don't know, like a
It's
hostage
going to tick a
situation would
few
be.
alarm bells.
Yeah, right. But they handle it very interestingly in that two people from the South African embassy come to the Dellums' home and just
Well,
take Mari.
first we have
Sorry.
the hard R scene, which we have to
Oh my
discuss.
gosh, we do have to discuss that. So
You take it away. This is the next scene after the phone call.
is it
And
okay?
it is exactly what I just described. It's another word that we're not going to use. We will just say the N word. They did not say.
So at least twice
It was
Piper
twice.
says the N-word.
Yep.
And Piper says it meaning,
Piper says it one
would
time.
you call me this? And Mari says, no, I would not call you that. Being the N-word.
Both girls say the full
The
word.
full N-word, very clearly pronounced.
Was
you know what?
a real interaction.
They did not put a warning on the front of this one.
They did not.
Which is interesting. They put a warning on the front of Aladdin. Maybe just it's not as popular, and so no one thought to do it. But yeah, no. When Piper says the word first, I audibly gasped. I because I mean
It comes seemingly out of nowhere.
even in 2000, that was like not okay. Like I remember in like 2005 we read some book in language arts class or whatever. Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry was the name of it. And they use the N-word. And I remember our teacher like giving us this big warning beforehand. And that's only 5 years after this movie. So like the fact that this played on Disney Channel, like just and again, same thing where a kid does not know what that means, does not know the history behind that word. They can't possibly, you know. And so anyway, so they have that
And they
conversation.
say the K word, the South African version, and I
Right.
feel like it's not stressed enough that
It's
now that
really
it's
bad.
the
Like you
same
can't
really bad.
you can't say that either. And right, I don't think it is because so anyway, so Piper says that, and then Mari says, no, like this is the word that we use. And
We
she
use
says like this K word.
yeah.
And
Mari says, I would call you Bantu, which just means black. I wouldn't call you the K word, which means N word. Mari says all the words.
right. So yeah,
So
so
it's to show you
I wouldn't call you K word, which means N word, saying the full words.
keep going with what you get out of that.
So so I get this. Mari's trying to be like, no, I'm one of the good guys. Right?
Right.
A very, very understandable and relatable. Like, I think for anyone who has had like a one-on-one friendship with a person of color, you get to this point where you realize that like you hold this awful history and like you want to be like, no, but that's not me. And so I think that's very realistic in that it happens. I think it didn't need to be in this movie.
I would agree.
Because I guess well so there's the age thing, the like who is the audience. But also just this like we don't use that word, you
No.
know? Like it's never okay to say that word.
And
And
this is a real interaction that Piper says, the real life Piper says that she did have with one of their exchange students named Carrie, was her real name. And what it tells you, at least what it tells me, again, as a grown adult, not as an 8-year-old, when I definitely watched this movie,
yeah.
is what it tells me as an adult is she's like, oh, I wouldn't use that word about you.
Because you're one of the good ones.
And also, but that's a word as people use around me a lot that I am not like I hear this word a lot.
Right.
And it
So
seems fine when I hear it.
yeah, right. She's not like right. She's not like she doesn't whisper the K word, right?
Right. And
She's not
she
like
doesn't say those are awful words. I never use them. No one
she
uses
just very
them.
matter of factly is like, "Oh, I wouldn't call you an N. You're a K." Like you're like,
Hmm.
"What?" So anyway,
What?
so Piper leaves her room. She asks her father about that word.
Well, her mom is doing her hair and she says, oh, like she's listing other things. They call the trunk of a car a boot. They do XYZ. And she would call us, what was it? And then she says the K word. And her dad says, if she calls you that, if she calls you that, I want her out. His dad gets up, he's like, I want her out of the house if she
Right.
said that to you. To show you that is really bad.
Right.
So this scene is more explicit, and she says, that's not what she said. She said Bantu. She said she'd never call me that one. But it still tells you this is a word she taught their daughter.
Right. Right.
Because again, and then again, we have to say, because this is the system that she has grown up
Right.
in.
It's like, no, you are this hateful word. Like it's just yeah, I don't have much more to say about that. It's a very upsetting scene, I would
It
say.
is jarring.
Um
So then we leave all that in the past and we have to move on. Mari has a direct conversation with Ron where she's like just late walking around the house and she starts reading Roots. And he says you should definitely read Roots. Again, I didn't know what Roots was
yeah, I had
when
to
I
look it
watched
up.
this movie. I know what it is now. There's a mini series. There might be more than one mini series now. It's a very intense book about
The
like
history of
the history of it's about a Black family in America. And so he says, oh, you can take it back to South Africa with you when you leave, which I'm like, that is probably a banned book in South Africa.
Fair enough.
But
Fair enough.
it's supposed to be them bridging the gap.
Right, that they're both softening towards each other.
School starts, we're going to school. They go to the same school. They're in junior high. Because again, these are 13, 14-year-olds.
Yeah.
It seems to be a majority Black school. Mari gets assigned a book report about Cry the Beloved Country, I think it's called. It's about South Africa. It's about the beginning of apartheid, I believe, and it follows a Black and a white man who have to work together to do something about the beginning of apartheid. I rented it from the library. I have not read it yet.
Oh, interesting.
And so Mari says, no, I've never heard of this book. It's probably just banned at home. And she's like, what do you mean banned? And she says, yeah, the government, for our own safety, bans books books and music and stuff that we're not supposed to read. It keeps
Very
us safe.
matter of factly.
It's the same way she mentioned the travel cards earlier. And she's like,
Right.
no, people, they like that. They being Black people, it keeps them safe and out of trouble, which is just what she's parroting what she's been told her whole life.
And I gotta be honest, I lived with a nun who grew up in Mussolini's Italy, and she talked about it very matter of factly. She does not hate Mussolini because that's how she grew up. She didn't know anything different. So this is so real. And yeah, that she's just like, yeah, we don't have certain books that could be dangerous for us, and that's how it is. So now can we get to when the embassy people come?
Yeah, now the embassy people, we have another bonding montage. They're dancing and skating and stuff. And then yes, the embassy comes and just takes Mari, and we're like, why did these
It's
two
a kidnapping.
people come
It's
and
straight
take
up a
her?
kidnapping.
It's,
Like,
yes.
I can't believe that Roscoe didn't fight more, because I would be like, wait a second, this child's safety is like my
Is in my
responsibilities.
hands.
You
and you're
can't just
taking
take her. Like, you can't, but they do. And they take her to the embassy, and at the embassy there are quite a few people protesting. And so she's like, what is this about? They're like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, blah 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 blah. But we find out that Stephen Biko had died. And the story at the embassy is that he had this is a family friendly show, so I just want to say he had harmed himself. Um and that's just kind of the lie that's going around. We find out
and
outside.
that they call him a terrorist, a troublemaker. Right. The line is not that he was an activist, which is what he is now known to be and what he was known at the time by the Black community. We see every worker at the embassy is white. They're all white South Africans. And they are saying, yes, he had harmed himself and he was a terrorist, and they're saying basically like not a big loss. The Americans are freaking out and blaming us.
Over nothing. The congressman is very upset about it. We find out that, you know, the report comes out that he was killed by the police. And so yeah, this is kind of a big deal.
This was a real thing that happened. Stephen Biko is a real man, and he was, yes, he was killed by the police while in custody.
Again, just take a deep breath.
Crossing
this is a DCOM.
A border. This is our least fun. These are normally just fun, sassy little episodes.
Like,
and this one's not.
Like, what? But in our last episode, we had people randomly breaking into dancing with no music.
I was thinking, right, because I had been thinking all along, oh, at the end it would be fun to tally up our scores and list the DCOMs we liked best. And then I was thinking, how do I possibly compare this movie to Radio Rebel and High School Musical?
Right.
My two favorite DCOMs are High School Musical and The Color of Friendship. Sounds like a thing that makes sense. And then you would watch the two back to back. Watch the two back to back.
You would get whiplash.
Literally.
Yeah. And we've discussed this a little bit in some of the older DCOMs, that the older DCOMs have more character development. They tend to seem like it should really be like a family movie. I mean, I guess
Ron and Roscoe are main characters in this movie.
They do have character development. Yeah, they do, absolutely. Like, this movie should only be watched as a family, I would think.
I would say yes.
Only in a situation where you can discuss it.
I almost feel
otherwise,
like sometimes they had, things on Disney Channel where like Rosie O'Donnell would like tell us about the environment and stuff. And I feel like this should have always been preceded by like Rosie O'Donnell telling us, hey, maybe as a family we should all sit down, or like Oprah Winfrey or Whoopi Goldberg could come on and be like, hey, maybe we should all as a family sit down.
Yeah, they did that after 9/11. After 9/11, like all the kids sat down and were like, oh, I was really scared, but then like I talked to my family and realized that like, no, we're really safe, or whatever that is. Yeah, this could have really benefited, and I mean,
and maybe they did at the time.
That's what I'm thinking.
And
I'm
we're
wondering.
Not seeing it on Disney Channel because they definitely ran like Black History Month things. They talked about George Washington Carver. They talked about the inventor of the traffic light was a Black American. They talked about Kwanzaa. So they did. They obviously talked about MLK. They did things like
Mae Jemison was the first Black woman astronaut. I know that they did stuff on her. Yeah, but this, I think what makes this so difficult is that it's so political. It's not just race relationships. It's international law.
Right?
And you're like, what
so
8-year-old?
Congressman Dellums like storms the embassy.
And it's like, this is not okay.
He's a congressman. And he's like, give her back to me. She is supposed to be staying with my family. And he says,
like, you kidnapped her.
You kidnapped her, and you already are dealing with horrible press. We don't see this scene, but he describes it to Roscoe later. He says, you're already dealing with horrible press over Stephen Biko. Let her come home with me so that I don't go tell the press that after the Stephen Biko thing, in order to cover it up and not let your citizens know about it, you kidnapped a child from my house.
Which sounds more like something that would happen in an episode of Law & Order SVU than
less like a DCOM
on Disney Channel.
Then Piper has a conversation while Mari's at the embassy. Piper has a conversation with her Nigerian friend. And he says, oh, I thought she'd be long gone by now, my brother and I had a bet on this. And she says she didn't leave of her own accord. They just took her.
Right.
And he says, Piper, you really think she's your friend? Ask her if you can go stay with her. Why do you think she hasn't invited you? She's just, he implies heavily that she is just playing a role here. She's just having fun. She's just slumming it for fun. She's just like, I always think of several years ago, 7 or 8 years ago, there was a photo shoot that Kim and Kanye did in what seemed to be like a relatively average house. Yeah. And they did it like for the aesthetic, and everyone was saying like, oh, they're just role playing middle class for the day. So that's kind of what he was saying. Oh, she's just like role playing, like living with,
which
with
I mean,
people.
yeah, like she's in America, she's doing what she has to do to make it. But
and then she's gonna go back to South Africa and just go on with her life, and it'll just be like that funny 4 months she spent in America is what he's implying. So Piper starts thinking about that more. Mari
Mhm.
comes back, and Mari's just in a great mood. And she's like, maybe Ron should have told her something about Stephen Biko. And
Mhm.
she goes to Piper, and she's like, I'm back. Let's boogie. You can't get rid of me. I'm like an old dime, whatever that means.
And Piper's
And
angry.
Piper's angry. Piper says, aren't you upset about Stephen Biko? And she says he's just a terrorist that, did that to himself. And
Mhm.
Piper says, no, your police did that to him, and they're pigs.
Which implies that Mari's father
Father is a pig.
is a pig.
And then Piper says, can I stay with you in South Africa? Can I come visit you? Can I do a semester abroad at your house so we can hang out again? And Mari says, yeah. And then they fight and they continue to fight. And then Mari runs outside. This is where I think the movie does a good job, because we
Mhm.
couldn't pretend like these two girls had solved all international race relations and
Correct.
fixed both America and South Africa, and we found world peace.
Yeah.
Like how in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, Bill and Ted's music is supposed to bring peace to the world, like
Oh,
this one
it's one
relationship.
of my favorite movies.
So good. It's
So
not going to
so
bring
Ron
peace to
goes
the world.
out. Congressman Dellum, goes out and kind of talks to Mari and says, we have a really difficult history too, and like this is where you are now.
And Mari's crying. She says, I wish Piper could visit me in South Africa, but she can't, and I can't change it.
Which is true.
Which also goes to show you, she is seeing, yes, for the first time here, that what she's been told by her government, by her parents, by everyone she trusts is not true. And she can't change it. Even if she feels this way, she's 13, 14 years old, she's living in
Right.
her parents' house, and she can't get them to say it's okay for
And
her
it
to stay
raises
there.
this question: is she a bad person because she can't do anything? Like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's very, very, it's so difficult, too difficult for a DCOM. Like,
They bit
my
off
goodness.
so much more than they can chew.
And one of the things that, as we've been going back and forth and planning this podcast, has been some of the movies that I thought were DCOMs were actually like Disney's World of Movies or whatever on ABC.
Mm-hmm.
And so I almost wonder if they pitched this as one of those ABC movies and it didn't work
Because
and
the
someone
ABC did have a slightly older audience.
correct.
Just some of their movies were for more teens. It was more of a teen night than Disney
It
Channel.
wasn't like explicitly for children.
Right.
And so like Ruby Bridges appeared as one of those like Saturday night movies or whatever on ABC. But this was on Disney Channel. And so I almost wonder if this was like a test to see if it would, you know, can we do this sort of stuff on Disney Channel? Um, I don't know. Anyway, let's get back to the
So
movie.
yeah, so then we have our final kind of scene. They go to like a march speech that
Mhm.
Congressman Dellums is giving. They're dressed in more traditional African outfits, and
Not
Mari
a ton of people.
carries
Yeah.
not a ton of people there. Mari carries one of the flags that we saw at the beginning of the
Hmm.
movie, having to do with the Black resistance in South Africa.
Yeah.
And so that's obviously a big, supposed to show her character development. But
Yeah.
again, it's subtle.
It's subtle, but like I don't know, like if her father saw a picture of that, like he would probably flip,
Right.
you
And
know?
then the next scene, she's going back to South Africa. Her time in
Hmm.
America is over. And she has the flag sewn into the inside of her vest.
Hmm.
She shows Flora wordlessly and
Just
they
to kind
hug.
of show that she's changed.
Right. And then she releases her brother's the bird that he'd kept in the cage, which was one of the weaver birds that live in the colonies.
Yeah. So this movie is under an hour and a half. Um, so it is really intense, start to finish.
And then
Um,
there's some like pro epilogue stuff that pops up on screen
mhm.
to tell us that the bill Ron Dellums had been working on to have sanctions against South Africa during apartheid passes in 1986, 9 years after the events of this movie. And in 1994, South Africa has its first fully free elections, and the Dellums family was present.
Yeah.
To show his continued relations with South Africa and with the Black people there. Again, some of the people who watch this movie can't read.
Yeah. So where I stand, great movie. Um It's inappropriate as a DCOM, is where I stand.
I'd have to agree. It's a great DCOM. I would recommend people watch it with their children who are, I would say, at the very least 7.
Middle school. I would say middle school.
All the way up to middle school. I definitely watched it before middle school.
Yeah.
I watched it again in middle school and have a conversation afterwards. Like, I wish there
Great
were
conversation
like
starter.
questions online. Maybe someone has them.
Well, but that's the thing is that like even we were sitting there Googling things to try to get a better understanding of what this was like.
And it's not, I don't want to give any discussion questions to have about it with your children because I'm not Black. I would like a Black person, ideally one who like lived through this time, and knows way more than me about these things, to give us discussion topics to have with our children after watching this movie. But I think
if you're an adult, I think watch this movie. You know, like it's so much more than I thought it was going to be. You know, there's a lot there, and I think it's a great kind of launching point. I mean, definitely, I'm really glad that we did this at the start of the month. You know, because then, you know, add more books to your reading list. You know, try to understand things a little bit more. Like I said, I kept throwing in my plug for Trevor Noah's book. It's funny what he does, you know, but you get the sense of how real the situation was. So.
And I will say again, in that article I read that had to do with Piper, that it was in collaboration with her, she said that the real Carrie, who they'd sponsored, she went back to South Africa. She became a leader in the student resistance movement. She was arrested. She wrote to them asking for the Dellums' help because she was being held in prison. And eventually the letters stopped coming. And they don't know what happened to her. And this is a family podcast, so I'm just going to say they think she might not have left prison.
Wow. Heavy stuff. Heavy
stuff for DCOM. This is not a light and fun episode.
But I have to say, like, when we talk about Black History Month, what comes to mind is what you were referring to earlier, like George Washington Carver and Mae Jemison and all of these happy, like, amazing things that Black people have done. And it's really, really important to have that juxtaposed with the reason that's so incredible is because of how many things throughout history have happened to work against that. You know, so the true triumph of those individuals and of communities in spite of this like horrific treatment and generational trauma. So that said, passion for fashion.
The fashion's actually really great because really they do 70s style. They've got great bell-bottoms. Roscoe's dressed amazing. Like, Roscoe looks so cool the whole time. It's the mom. She wears just fun 70s outprint shirts, and she's got bell-bottom jeans on too. They're wearing big platform shoes. They wear sort of like a kind of like thing around your head, like you'd imagine hippies wearing.
Like a little
costumes.
Headband.
The fashion's fun. It's what you think 70s, but not super overdone. It felt like authentic. And then when they wear the traditional African outfits, I thought those were great too. I know that those some of those prints have a lot of symbolism. I don't know what any of them mean. Not educated on that subject, but I thought they all looked great.
Yeah. Thought it was good.
No specific outfits pop out to me as bad or not cute. And so I've got passion for fashion. One of the only trivia things on IMDb about this movie was that this was the only one that says the N-word on the Disney Channel, and I was like, good.
I'm glad.
I would hope so.
Yeah. So, like you said, it's hard to compare it to the other movies. I would objectively give it a 10. You know, as a movie.
But our rating system is supposed to be in comparison to other DCOMs, which is like, how do we compare this to Radio Rebel? So I would say, I don't know. It's hard because, it's, like we said, is it supposed to be like for a 5-year-old audience? I would say no.
Right. Yeah.
It's supposed to be for, like we said, middle school audience. Yes, I think it's a good movie. I would say watch it with your children. I would say you should have conversations about this movie. I mean, we should be having conversations about race in general.
Yeah. And it's a good time of year to do that. And again, in 2024, we have so many more resources than we did in 2000 to try to understand the complex history and the repercussions of that that there's lots of great books,
It's true.
podcasts,
And I think
movies. Yeah.
the open-ended ending is good. We see we've changed Mari, but she doesn't go back and change her whole family because that's not going to happen.
Right.
How
She
many
doesn't
people
save
do we know?
South Africa.
I mean,
Right.
people have the joke nowadays, the stereotype is that, oh, like my racist, like people love their racist grandma because you can't change her,
Mhm.
kind of a thing. But that's, imagine, right, going home to her dad's a police officer, her incredibly racist
Right.
parents, and trying to change them. That's not going to happen.
Right.
So it was good to see that she had changed, and that's all we can do, I guess, is change one person. It's easier to change a young person than an old person's opinions about
Absolutely.
things. And it was a great movie. Yeah, I'd probably give it a 9 out of 10. That scene, the hard R scene, as I'm gonna call it, is not easy to watch.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like, I don't know, maybe there could have been a warning or more cultural context about just Stephen Biko or what was gonna happen. Because like we said, we don't really see, but we do see someone kick someone,
Mhm.
and there's not a warning, and they discussed what happened with Stephen Biko. It's a tough watch. I'm gonna have to give it a 9 out of 10 just for the lack of warning.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I've said
if you
it.
think, and it's called The Color of Friendship. I don't know what the slogan is on Disney Plus. Does not make it sound as intense as it is. And the
Look
photo,
beyond black and white and you'll find the color of friendship.
right? Maybe should we say like during an intense political climate between two
Right,
countries?
because that's what it is. It's not just like, oh, we don't like white people. Yeah, you know what? I've said enough. I've said everything that I have to say about this
episode,
movie.
I think.
It is a really long one, but an important
Another
one.
super episode, but an important one. I'm glad we started out Black History Month on it. I would say one of the better DCOMs. Doesn't feel like a DCOM for that reason. And DCOMs do handle some other heavy topics. There's a Shia LaBeouf one where he has autism. So there are some more intense ones like this. They are few and far between. It's a good movie. It's definitely one I would say has rewatchability, especially with a middle school age. Like I wouldn't show it. My son is 3 and I wouldn't show it to him now. I would show it to him in 8 years, maybe. And have a discussion with him about it, which I think is good. It's a good jumping off point for discussion for families in a way most DCOMs are not.
Yep. All right. So this has been Go Big or Go DCOM. You can find us on our Substack or go dcom.substack.com. We are available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. All right. So I'm Cece Ciccone.
I'm Kelsey Bowman.
And we'll see you next week. Oh, wait. What are we watching next week?
Next week, we are watching Jump In with Corbin Bleu.
Oh, so that'll be a fun one. Good.
That'll be fun. We love Corbin Bleu. Something light.
All right. We'll see you next week.